General Baxter, what does transformational leadership look like when we're dealing with a local community such as Lawton and a state like Oklahoma?
Well, I think going in we have to be careful about the terms that we use, and I'm one that thinks that terms like servant leadership and transformational leaders are probably overused. And my experience has been that people who claim to be servant leaders, and you can see it every day on LinkedIn, or they're transformational leaders, probably are not. And I think there's a big difference. You know, a lot of folks who claim to be servant leaders believe you give the tasks to your organization and you just sort of walk away from that without continuing to see that the job's done. And that's pretty much a wrong answer on that. I think, you know, servant leadership really means the leader making sure everyone's heard, making sure the group is diverse, making sure everybody's needs are met, resourcing them properly, and then not walking away from it, but staying involved in the process. I do not believe in leaderless groups. I think, you know, a servant leader has got to be involved and has got to continue to ensure the mission gets met. And here, that's a little bit more difficult than you might think. I mean, servant leadership is pretty rare. Transformational leadership, pretty rare. I think transformational leadership is the individual, the leader that has the one big idea, the one thing that can change everything. Now, how many people that we know can produce that sort of idea? Not many. So I don't know, is it one person in 100,000 a transformational leader? I don't know for sure, but some thoughts on transformational leadership, you know, locally here. You know, we've got tent cities going on for the homeless. We've got a wonderful, though small, shelter which has been resourced now and is operating. We've got ideas about tiny houses, and we've got the resource center over here. You know, a transformational idea would be to do all this on a tremendously upscale way. We have more vacant schools in Lawton than you can shake a stick at. What would it take to turn those schools into veteran centers where complete needs are resourced, from safety to food to clothing to jobs? A lot of money involved, a lot of leadership involved. That's transformational. I think the rest of it's just playing around the edges of trying to help veterans that are in need. So I think the answer is we need the person with the big idea who's enough of a leader to make all that happen, and that's a substantial task.
So the transformational leader is the big idea person at maybe the top of that, maybe an apex predator leader in that space, and then he or she can delegate authority to the servant leaders that ensure the tasks are being taken care of, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. But whoever that is has still got to be the person that's taking ownership of this for the success of the project.
Right.
And those servant leaders you're talking about have got to be servant leaders, you know. And if they're not, they're probably going to have, not in my generation, not in your generation, but in our current generation of young people, it's probably not going to be a successful approach unless you're willing to at least demonstrate some of those traits of servant leaders.
Right. Lead by example, and leaders eat last.
Yeah, yes, exactly right. Exactly right. You know, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was a Minnesota guy by the name of Jack Vesey. He was a first sergeant that got a battlefield promotion in the Second World War, went on to Korea. And he used to say that you could tell how often an officer ate in the mess hall by the way he handled his mess kit. And it was so true, because it was difficult. If you didn't know how to handle that mess kit, you'd drop it, you'd turn it upside down. It's just telling things, sort of like eating last.
I hear that. How do we build trust among the VA groups and the clinics and the VA organizations and the local communities? And is there a collaboration effort while you were in at the Fort Sill level and here in other commands? Do you collaborate with the commands with the VA?
The short answer is not nearly as well as we should, but it's a bigger issue than just collaboration with the VA. if you've got a problem like building trust among networks, you gotta put these people together, and you have to do it, my opinion, at the leadership level, not at the director level, not at the chief of staff level, not at the number 3 guy deputy level. But if you put the leaders in this community in a room and they agree on a common way forward, they can accomplish anything. And who are they? They're the commanding general at Fort Sill. He himself, not his chief of staff, not his garrison commander, but him. It's the president of Cameron University. It is the president or the superintendent of the Great Plains Technology Center. It is the mayor. It's not the city manager, and it's not the this or that. It's he. And then there's probably a 6th, the Hillary Communications, major, wealthy now corporation locally here, very philanthropic, and the Goodyear Corporation, largest employer in Southwest Oklahoma. So you get those 7 guys that run those organizations in the same room, you'll have a collaboration because they'll make it happen if they are committed, if helping veterans is important enough to them. And there is part of the issue. We as veterans have not done enough to make the veteran problem heard. We've not done enough. I wear this black ring. I've worn this for 20 years now, I guess, Terry, and it's called a 22 kill ring.
Right.
The purpose of it is to have people who don't know say, hey, why are you wearing that black ring?
Right.
It's a reminder that veterans are committing suicide at the rate of 20, 16, 19, depending on what numbers you like, a day, you know. Now, somebody should care enough about that to do something about it. Haven't seen it yet nationally, haven't seen it locally, you know, not with the true leaders of the organization. I don't know what General Costello is doing about veterans that are homeless. I mean, there's very little he could really do all by himself, but
Right.
get all those guys together, and that's kind of the key to the kingdom as far as I'm concerned.
Right, we have to get them together and try to get them in step, in
Yeah.
sync.
And you know, who could facilitate that whole group? Well, there's not a whole lot of people that could do that. The lady that's running this place is one of them that could. Highly respected, very smart, understands the problem, can be a pain when she needs to be, trust me on that.
Yep.
And there are several others that could probably do it as well. She'd be a great candidate. But it's a leadership issue. It's not a matter of staff meeting every month to talk about the homeless veteran problem. It doesn't ever get anything done.
That's just another one of those check the box meetings.
Yeah, and they go on forever. People leave, they go home, and they come back next month.
They see the bar graphs and the stats and the
Yeah.
other slides, and
Yeah.
there's no decision on policy made that actually gets tangible steel on target.
That's exactly right. It's because nobody in the room could make the decision. They're not empowered to do that. And with this kind of issue, you don't want to empower a whole lot of people to make the decision on how you're going to go forward as a community to attack these veteran problems. And it's going to take that, you know. I almost throw up when I say that, but it kind of takes a village, you know. I mean, in its own way, to solve this kind of problem.
And I think you're right, maybe Dr. Brenda Spencer-Ragland is the spark plug that initiates the charge in the motor or the
She
engine.
could well be, and I mean, she's well qualified to do it, and has got the background, has got the experience. And I'm not trying to give her yet another job, but she could do it. And I'm not saying she's the only one that could, but she comes to my mind.
Absolutely. So what lessons from your command experience translate into municipal or state level policy in Oklahoma, especially in high impact cities like Lawton, where I think in Lawton we have a little bit of an atypical amount of issues?
Yeah, I think we do too. I think we do too. So what about all that, municipal or state level? I go back again to leadership. If the leaders are not involved, it ain't gonna happen, particularly at the state level. We don't get anything done in Lawton politically with the state unless we have leaders involved in making it happen. Our legislators, fine guys, work the issues hard, do some policy stuff, but if you wanna make big impact, you gotta have leaders. We also have to have policies that are designed to protect the very least of us. not you and me. You know, we're in a warm place and we're wearing sweaters and suits.
Right.
And that may well be that the veteran population is that population, you know, that is amongst the least of us, that veteran homeless population. You know, one thing, I did some work for the Center for Brain Health at the University of Texas, and one of the things that I uncovered from that about homelessness and veterans is that women veterans returning home are much more likely to be homeless than men.
Really?
Very it's just not, you know, it's not intuitive that that's the case.
Right.
And a lot of them refuse to accept that they are veterans. I mean, they don't want the help of the VA. They may be single moms, they may have a bad experience in the military. And so I just think that's kind of interesting. And I'm a guy that's sort of disappointed in our faith community.
Right.
I'm somewhat disappointed in what they do individually as well as a group. I don't see why the Catholics and the Baptists can't make it all happen for the good of the community. And I had the same feeling at Fort Sill. The chaplains there were, you know, pretty secular, I guess is the right word, and didn't work well together. And I just think there's so much we could do to open the doors, you know. Now I want to give you, in the context of this, a transformational leadership story.
Okay.
The Oklahoma City Thunder are our basketball team, and we love them.
Right.
I don't think people are aware that every night that there's a game in the Paycom Center in Oklahoma City, when the game is over, the Thunder bring in homeless people. And they give them brooms, and they give them mops, and they give them things to pick up the crap. They pay them $25 to $30 an hour. They feed them, and they let them spend the night inside.
Wow.
There's a transformational leader that did that. Why aren't the Catholics doing that? Why aren't the Methodists doing that?
That's an outstanding question.
And I mean, it's like, when I first heard this, I just could hardly believe it. And you know, they've always got food left over after the games. We used to have seats there, and we'd go eat in a place, wonderful food. They always had all kinds of food left over. Well, they feed the homeless people while they're working on cleaning the Paycom Center.
Right. And the
Fantastic.
churches I've seen, they have soup kitchens and they have clothing drives, but once that gets to like some type of point of distribution, there's a lot of not just veterans, but there's a lot of the homeless that don't take advantage of that, and that program just sort of sits idle and stagnant. It's not really doing much benefit, and a lot of those homeless people are sort of stuck in a rut in some ways, and it requires more than a handout, I think.
I do too. And, you know, maybe the best thing that churches could do together to help in this is to get out of their churches,
Right.
to provide their outreach somewhere else other than at the altar. I mean, and you're talking about veterans, some veterans are gonna be hesitant to come in there, and that doesn't mean they won't, but a lot of them won't. And if we don't have that stuff that's easily available for them to access, you know, we're trying hard. And I'm not being critical of the churches for not making efforts, because they do, but they could do so much more if they were able to work collaboratively to make things happen, in my view.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons I've been going out with a friend of Dr. Spencer Ragland's named Jonathan, and we'll walk among the community and talk to the people out there. And then he's shown me some other places in town where there's congregations of people where you can see they're drinking, and you can see open dealing in the street here. So that's one of the questions I asked the officer in Lawton. How aggressive of an approach are they taking towards that? How do you measure success in servant leadership, and when the outcomes are human dignity, safety, and recovery, what do the results of that type of scoreboard look like?
Well, first of all, if that's the job, if that's the mission, the successful servant leader will get the mission accomplished. And you know, I thought a lot about this question because it's a difficult one. And I kind of reverted back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with them.
Right.
The first thing that's needed is safety. You know, so that means veterans have to be off the streets, they've got to be fed, they've got to be insulated from personal harm, they've got to have predictability in their day-to-day life. Then you kind of go on to social needs. They need they need love, they need friendship, they need attention, they need intimacy, they need families. You know, they have needs for esteem, self-actualization eventually. So whatever we're doing has got to provide all of that for the most needed. And you can't measure that success any other way. You really can't say, well, we've got 24% of the homeless veterans are safe now. That's failure, you know.
Right.
You got to get it all done in all of those categories of needs, but the most important are certainly taking care of their personal needs and jobs. We always debated, what is more important? Is it a home or is it a job? And I think you can argue that either way. It's a big task, and for a servant leader, it's just like any other leader. If they've got the mission to do it, they're going to do it their particular way, but if they don't get it done, they're a failure.
And you mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that's something that Dr. Spencer Ragland talks about as well. And she says the first thing they need is some baseline of security and
Yep.
basic needs and food and stuff.
Yeah, have
And-
a warm place to sleep at night where they're
Yeah.
not going to get, you know, abused in the process or robbed or whatever those safety things are.
And that's when I think she also talked to Burl and they'd prayed about it. And Burl said, I think we need to buy this building. Now they've got this church that they've opened up their doors of the church to the community at large. And I'm wondering if that's maybe another thing that some of the other churches can do is open up their doors wider and open up their hearts, because some of the former homeless people that I talked to said that there's a lot of people in the communities, and especially the church, that they don't feel comfortable around because they feel like they're looked down on.
You know, I was raised as a Catholic,
Mhm.
and, you know, the resources of the Catholic Church are virtually unlimited. They are so huge.
Mhm.
Latter-day Saints.
Richest church in North America.
Richest church in North America, not in the world yet.
Right.
Very wealthy. And so, you know, it bothers me when I see the situation that you're describing, where the doors aren't wide open as they could be, and then I wonder who in that faith is taking care of that problem. Because there's a lot, you know, just how far does $1 billion go to solve this problem? A long, long ways. And how much would the Catholic Church miss that? Not one bit. And so, and I'm not knocking the Catholics, I'm just using an example of what you're saying. I agree with. There's not enough being done, and they are the natural people to do it, you know.
Right, and they gotta remember Jesus was a shepherd to all, not just the folks in the middle class and up.
Yeah, and that's why I say we've got, whatever we do, we've got to take care of the weakest of us all, you know.
Absolutely.
And it's a big, big job. You know, we never expected this. We didn't think this was what we were going to get out of Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, it's not what we thought was going to happen, and it did. And we've got more people, you know, that have come back with a condition that in my career, we were still denying the existence of post-traumatic stress.
Right.
The G1 of the Army, the guy responsible for human resources for the Army, went public and said, there's no such thing as PTSD. These guys are just cowards, you know.
Right.
And, well, we know all that's not true, but it's just such a huge problem, and it just takes a lot to fix it. And I think we're over that part. I think everybody agrees this condition exists now. Traumatic brain injury, another one, you know, good Lord.
Oh,
And that's not easy to fix.
no,
And,
there's so many afflicted with that because they were in some type of vehicle that got hit one way or another, or in some, I think there's some folks that can have TBI just from hitting the ground from parachute operations.
No questions they can.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to mention in response to all that is another part of this problem is really it's kind of good news, bad news. The good news is, you know, we've had thousands of soldiers who have lost limbs, lost arms, lost legs, lost both, and through modern medicine, we've been able to save their lives on the battlefield.
Right.
But now we bring home a kid missing 2 legs and an arm. He needs rehabilitation. He still needs a job. He still needs to care for his family. You know, so you wonder sometimes whether in his mind he kind of was thinking maybe he'd have been better off dead. And we get, you know, what we get in terms of suicides.
That's
So,
exactly right. I just listened to a veteran the other day that's a quadruple amputee, and he's on social media, and he said the first question he asked himself when he came to in the hospital is why am I alive?
yeah.
And then there's the survivor's guilt, and then he said he's talking to his wife, and he said, hey, you don't need this. You can go ahead and, you know, take the house, take whatever money we got, and take the kids. This isn't the life I want for you. And she said, oh, he said that she said, well, I thought about that, but we're going to get through it.
Yeah, there's a kid, who were you? You weren't talking to this guy locally, were you?
No, he's on social media.
What was his name?
I can't remember his name, but
Well, you know, there's not very many living four-way amputees, quad amputees, and this guy was a quad amputee.
Right.
Did you say, yeah? I know one also, and he was in Texas, and he had prosthetics for all 4 limbs, so he could walk, and he was a speaker, and he was absolutely wonderful speaker, and it was very humorous presentation. He made light so much of it. Well,
that must be the same guy.
yeah, the weather got so bad for him in Texas that his body couldn't react to the Texas heat. So he moved up to New Hampshire, I think, and somebody bought him a huge ranch and he turned it into a veterans retreat center. And he's running that retreat center up there, and his name is, I'm so old.
Was it Jason or something?
No, honey, it wasn't Jason, but
We're gonna have to look that up because the social media clip that I saw, I don't believe it had his name on there, but he was telling jokes like, he
Yeah,
said
that's
when
the
he
guy.
when he woke up at Walter Reed, there was a Marine that came in and said, welcome to the club, and he said, I don't want to be in your club, and the Marine said, well, it's kind of too late now. He said, well, you got me there, and the Marine showed him the way, and he said, well, I know if this Marine can do it, I can do it.
yeah, that's exactly the way he was.
Yeah,
And I think he was an E3 or an E4 when all this happened to him. He was married, had kids,
yeah,
and is now got a very robust family life, and he's living there with his kids and his wife, and he's productive, you know, and he's running this retreat center, and he's helping other veterans. Well, you know, that's a hell of a story.
yeah, and I really appreciate when those kind of guys can rise to that occasion. But like you brought up Iraq and Afghanistan, and this isn't what we were maybe planning. I'm not quite sure what we were planning overall, except maybe in Afghanistan, cut the legs out of Taliban and basically encircle Al-Qaeda, which we did after that. But then after 2011 or so, we'd already gotten Saddam Hussein and Bin Laden. So definitely after that, it was mostly mission creep. But that mission creep still cost a lot of soldiers a lot of heartache, grief, and pain.
Yeah, it certainly did that. And, you know, the one thing that we didn't anticipate that we got was the improvised explosive device. We
Right.
were not ready for IEDs. And there was a cottage business that cranked up that was, to prevent IEDs and all this kind of stuff. None of that crap ever worked, and none of it ever really got in the field. So we never did really solve the problem of IEDs, which killed so many and disabled so many. A guy by the name of Mark Graham retired as a Major General. He was the Chief of Staff at Fort Sill. While he was the Chief of Staff, his older son was commissioned in the Army as a lieutenant, and his younger son was a junior at the University of Kentucky. In the same year, the older one stepped on an IED and was killed in Iraq, and the second son at the University of Kentucky committed suicide. Lost 2 sons in 1 year, and all of it tied to, in one family, you've got the worst of it. You've
Right.
got the death, you've got a suicide, and they've really devoted the rest of their lives to educating and trying to help in the veterans business. And Field Artilleryman, a great guy.
Yeah, I would argue that the strikers and the MRAPs are too heavy to be nimble enough in Afghanistan anyway.
Yeah.
And my cousin got hit in a MRAP, and the RPG-7 went right through it. So you're right, you know, a lot of cases, a big heavy MRAP that's too heavy, not nimble enough to get around the mountainsides of Afghanistan, in many cases wasn't, I don't know how useful it was, so I.
Yeah, they weren't nimble enough to do what needed to be done, and that was really disappointing.
Well, General Baxter, I really appreciate you taking some time to speak with me. I'm going to continue to film as you're speaking through the events, and again, I'll be blending this into a video.
Well, that's
for us.
great. I really appreciate it, and you're paying more attention to me than you should.
No, it's an honor to talk to any of the stars.
Well, thank you very much. I hope some of this was useful. It was certainly a great conversation for me. If it wasn't useful for you, it's been really good for me, and I appreciate it.
I think we just get the message out, and whoever listens, listens.
Yeah, you just got to keep working on
Maybe
it.
something will hit somebody's ear.
Maybe so.